My name's Steve Hayes. I'm a research forester at the Bureau of Business and Economic Research here at the University of Montana. I know in the original pamphlet, Todd Morgan's name was with this topic, and Todd ended up having to do something else today, so he asked me to fill in for him. So I've been working for the BBER for almost 6 years. Previous to that, I was a forester for forest industry here in Montana. 15 years with Champion International and 15 years with Plum Creek here in Missoula. And I graduated here from the university with both an undergraduate in forestry and a master's in forestry. So I spent a lot of time here at the university. And I'll touch a little bit on biomass. Martin was going to have somebody else come in and spend some time talking about biomass, but nobody was available. I can tell you what I know and some of the projects that we've been involved with on biomass. Or, if you have some questions, I can certainly direct you to the right person. Okay, so the Bureau of Business and Economic Research. That's a big mouthful. Took me about 3 months after I started working there to be able to rattle it off without getting tongue-tied. And we're the Research and the Public Service Branch of the University of Montana School of Business Administration. So we're cross-campus. But our forestry research group, which I'm part of, does a lot of projects and works pretty close with the College of Forestry on different forestry issues. The BBR's mission is to serve the general public, business, labor, and government by providing an understanding of the economic environment in which Montanans live and work. So what do we do? Come on in. So we do state and local economic analysis. That's what this booklet is. It's a outlook seminar that the Bureau does every year. They travel around the state, to eight, 9 cities statewide. With the legislative year, they usually start in Helena, give a presentation to the legislators and the governor, and have the general Helena one, and they'll do Missoula and Billings, Bozeman, Butte, Kalispell. Then on alternating years, they go to Sidney, Miles City, or Lewistown, Haviland. So they pretty much cover the state. And lots of different parts of the economy are presented. And in our group, we have a survey research group. So we've got a room with that can make phone calls, if that's a phone survey type thing. And that type of thing is kind of not used as much anymore with people going to cell phones. It's hard to, call and irritate people at dinner time. So that's not as big a part of the Bureau as it used to be. There's a fellow that concentrates on healthcare, the healthcare industry research. And under that, there's a group that works on kids count, which tracks the health, welfare, and education of children statewide. And it's a grant-based funding program. It's funded by the Casey Foundation. And, the group here is really good. Then the group that I work in, the Forest Industry Research Group, we also track manufacturing around the state. So in this publication, you'll see an article that talks about Montana manufacturing and also the forest industry. Oops. Let's see if I can get it to go back. It's a good thing I have a mouse with a long tail. So the forest industry research. We actually do more than just Montana. Up here there's a report for Idaho and Montana. We also do Alaska, Oregon, California, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona. It's on a 5-year rotating basis. This report you have for Montana, the data year is 2009. So we collect all the data for 2009, then it takes a year or so to analyze it and write the report, and then it gets published. So it was actually, this report wasn't published until 2013, even though the data was 2009. The data can get kind of stale, but a lot of the tables and the information we try and get up on our website as soon as we can. So folks that need the information and know where to get it, they can get more up-to-date type stuff. Montana and Idaho, we do yearly rather than every 5 years. So even though we don't put out a report, that information is available and we track it. Somebody mentioned the Forest Service report. We do this work for the Forest Service in other parts of the country. Their research stations do it. Years ago, for some reason, the research stations in Pacific Northwest and Interior West didn't want to do this, but this type of research is mandated by the Resource Planning Act, and timber products output is part of that. So they contracted with Chuck Keegan, who's been at the Bureau for 35 years, to do this type of work, and we're pretty proud. We think we're able to produce it faster and cheaper than the Forest Service research stations could do it. So we also do projects where we track the cost of forest management, logging, hauling, those types of things, and we've been involved with numerous other projects over the years. So I'm not here to train you how to sell your own timber. We always recommend that it's good to get the services of a professional forester. There's lots of options there. The state has service foresters, extension with their stewardship. They've got foresters that help teach that. There's private consultants, and a lot of the mills have professional foresters that work for them, where you can get some information, good information from. So what I'm going to talk about today is stumpage value. Stumpage can tend to be kind of a weird term for some people, and they don't understand what it is, so I'll try and explain that. The major factors that affect stumpage value, we'll talk about Montana's wood products industry, where the facilities are, what their markets are, and then some key issues, and then talk about the 2015 outlook for Montana's forest industry. And if anybody has a question as I'm going along, just interrupt and we can answer it. So stumpage. It's the value of the standing timber calculated before the trees are cut. And what I found was the strange term originated when years ago you bought a tree. So then after the harvest was done, you just go around and count the stumps, and that's what you got paid for. And that's where the term stumpage came from. And it's used, lots of different places nowadays. Stumpage value, it's the residual of the revenue. It's the residual from revenue after the products have sold. So after the lumber is sold or the plywood is sold, and you take the costs away, That's what the stumpage value is. It should be a fairly straightforward concept, but it's not. And there's a lot of things that go into making it confusing, and hopefully I'll try and assess, give you some information on that. So most of the products, lumber, plywood, defense posts, that's what that's what wholesalers, retailers pay the mills for their products. So that's the product price. And to confuse things further, there's a mill delivered price. As landowners selling your timber, this is probably what you're most familiar with. This is what a mill will pay you for your timber because it's delivered to their mill. A lot of them call it gatewood. So as you come in the gate, that's what they'll pay you for it. So both of these, both the delivered log price and stumpage, is net of costs. Both of them, there's logging and hauling costs involved, and there's different factors that go into increasing logging costs, like the logging system, the size of the tree, the hauling costs, how far you are from the mill. All these things can impact that.
What's the silviculture prescription mean?
That is how you treat the stand. One silviculture, one silviculture prescription could be thinning, another one could be a seed treat, could be a clear cut, those types of things. Those costs are different depending on what you're doing. So, there's somebody writing over there. I'll wait till you're done.
Okay, let's see, 1,000 board feet, and you can have, is it 2,500 board feet on a regular tractor trailer?
An average that we use for a log truck is, and it all depends on the size of the timber, and the species, time of year, that type of stuff. We use 4.2 thousand board feet per truckload. It's kind of a standard. And that's at 28 tons.
Okay, 28 tons, and that's without a self-loader, okay.
Right, yeah.
4.2
thousand, yeah. On a self-loader, if that's what you're interested in, the average is closer to probably 3.5 to 3.7.
3 point, how about 3.7
Yeah.
with self-loader?
A lot of these depends on weight, most of this presentation, I'm talking about 1,000 board feet. A lot of mills, a lot of loggers will charge by the ton. That's how they get paid.
So your 4.2 is for 18 wheels?
Yes, the normal typical logging truck you see on
Without a loader.
the highway. And that can range. A lot of small logs that don't scale too well, could be 3,500 per load. Big logs, big spruce that's fairly light, that could be 5,500 per load. But typically what we've seen around here lately is average is about 4.2. But it's also variable. You have to talk about it individually.
Can you give us some ranges and some averages from converting from thousands to tons?
I can, yeah. It's very, very variable. Typically, and a lot of this, what we found we use is 6.2 tons per thousand. As you get bigger logs and some species, that weight factor, it depends on the density of the wood. It can depend on the season. In the spring, there's a lot more water in all these trees, so they're heavier. Different species, pine, bull pine is pretty heavy. So a lot of times, these factors are kind of, it's hard to pin on. Bunch of small logs, your weight factor may be 7, 8. Pulp can be 9 or 10. So it's just so variable.
Even dead lodgepole versus green lodgepole, I know is of significance.
Yeah, and then when you get into the dead wood, you can stack it a lot higher before you hit your weight limit. But it may scale fairly well, or it may not, you know, there's a lot of different variables, and you almost have to talk about specific times and places. I can talk to you afterwards a little bit if you want.
Where do we factor in the pre-commercial thinning, the planning, the PCTs, the pre-commercial thinning, the plantings, and then the road maintenance? Where are we factoring that in?
Right now, we haven't.
Okay, all right.
It would come into other things, and in a couple slides, I talk about that
Good.
too, so, go ahead.
Well, it sounds like the most accurate for the hauler would be per ton.
Right. Sometimes they do it per mile. And we'll talk about hauling a little bit too.
Loaded mile.
Yeah. So we've talked about delivered logs. That's the blue line. And this is since 2000. One of the projects that we do is on a quarterly basis, we talk to all the mills and we get what they're paying for delivered logs by species. And so that's the blue line. So those are by quarters. The red line is lumber prices. And we get that from Random Lengths. They report that weekly. So that's why those lines are so much squigglier. The reporting is more often. You can see the highs and the lows. You can see when the last recession was. You can see where it started and where it ended up. Those are the lumber prices.
Wow.
When I put this together a couple of years ago, what really struck me was at the beginning of the recession, lumber prices went down pretty dramatically, pretty fast. The delivered log prices didn't. So thinking about it and talking to people, one conclusion that I came up with, whether it's right or wrong, I don't know. People that were buying logs either weren't ready to accept the fact that we were going into a recession and lumber prices were going to continue to go down. You can see other places where lumber prices have gone up and down. Log prices stayed fairly stable. But it just took them a while to either accept the fact that lumber prices were going to stay down, and so they couldn't pay as much for the delivered logs. And,
Except for the bias in the scaling formula, it would appear they are continuing operating at a loss.
that's a good question. And hopefully, this whole thing was set up to kind of confuse everybody. How can you pay more for logs than what you're getting for?
Yeah.
So, we'll talk a little bit about different scales, I guess.
Obviously, somebody's taken a load into pyramid lumber, haven't you? Oh, no.
So, if we look at the lumber prices, and right now, from Random Lengths, if you use their composite lumber price, they're getting it's right at about $400. So a mill selling lumber is going to get $400 a thousand. Lumber is measured in 1,000 board feet. Like logs are measured in 1,000 board feet. Lumber is measured in 1,000 board feet lumber tally. Logs are measured in 1,000 board feet Scribner
Scale.
or other scale. There's different scales around the country. There's a Doyle that's used in the South. There's International Quarter Inch. There's a bunch of different scales, but for the West, we settled on Scribner, and Scribner did his thing in the mid-1800s, and what he did was he took a log and he figured out how many boards of varying size you could cut out of that log of a certain diameter. And that's where Scribner log scale came from.
Scaled off the top, not the butt.
Right, small end.
If you got a load of tapered, I've got one outfit in particular.
So-
You know, you go up there, then you better be prepared to donate a fair amount of that load.
Yeah. Sounds like a logger. And probably real familiar with scale. So, and what's happened over time, you know, when Scribner did this in the 1800s, most of the logs that everybody was dealing with were pretty big. As time went on and logs got smaller, mills got more efficient, they were able to use smaller logs. It became kind of
Steve,
wacky.
welcome to the world of small dimension wood.
Yep.
It's the truth. This is a fact of life for everybody
Yeah.
in this room.
And so people continue to use Scribner scale as a measure of logs. Is that good or bad? I don't know. A lot of people have gone away from scale to tons. There's mills that'll buy wood by the ton. But because they convert it into lumber board feet, they still have to figure out their scale, their log scale. So almost all the mills still scale at some point. So they're getting $400 for their lumber. And then stumpage, you know, is what's left over after you pay your costs. So if it costs them $150 1,000 to process the logs into lumber, it costs $100 1,000 to get the logs from the woods to the mill, and it gets $150 for the logging, and then there's, say, $50 incidental.
It's a write-off.
You know, you subtract your revenues and your costs, there's no money there. So how can they do this? Well, what the mills, and this is why it pays for mills to be more efficient, more high-tech, and continue to invest in, computerized equipment and stuff. There's a thing called overrun and lumber recovery. A lot of mills, for every million board feet of logs that go in, will get 1.5 million of lumber out of it.
So it's not just 10%, is it? You're not just
No.
tithing
No.
when the
Nope,
fork comes to.
and the more efficient they are, depending on the product, a stud mill, they can get up to, 20, 50% overrun. And that's where they're able to be able to pay more for logs than what they're getting paid. So if, at 1.5 times, so their true value for their lumber is actually $600 when you figure out their overrun. So that's how they figure things out. So instead of, being zero at the end, break even, there may be $150 there extra, if that's right. I wasn't a math major, so it may not add up. The idea is that's how they figure out how much they can pay for their logs. Each mill is different. They have different overrun. They have different efficiencies, different products. Instead of $400 on the random lengths composite, if it's high value pine boards or something, this number may be $600. So it depends on the value of the product. But the concept is they're actually getting more because lumber tally is different than log scale. There's some high-tech mills out in Oregon that use a fairly uniform log, and some of their overrun is like 2.5 times. So they're really efficient. Does that concept, people understand what I'm trying to get there?
The extra all comes from the stuff that Scrivener doesn't count around the edges, is that what?
A lot of it, some of it, yeah. But, and the other thing is, when he did it, all the, those big bandsaws that had a kerf of 1/4 of an inch, they're down, some of the bandsaws now are, 1/16 of an inch or less. So there's more wood that's being used.
If you go up into Canada, they have a program for everybody from the tall to the small, that you can, it's a no interest loan or low interest loan to buy state-of-the-art equipment, and I mean state-of-the-art. These folks spoke English up by Grand Prairie, okay? They were from French descent. You didn't think you'd find them over on the west side of the country. You do. And they walked me through, and this was a small, just maybe a skosh smaller than Pyramid up here, okay? But it had technology in it that Pyramid cannot afford. And that means efficiency quotient goes, and that means a cost overrun. That's when we can really start to play with the numbers, and this is why they could load one up in the spring and head it right down to the Moorhead, Minnesota railhead for that sort of money.
Yeah, but any mills that are still working, they know this number, because they're out buying timber sales, state Forest Service timber sales, so they know how much they can pay. And so that's why mills are still in business.
What is the length of a tractor trailer, not a pump? What length would that
You're
be?
34 feet is your log length.
34 feet?
34
That's
feet.
typical.
Yeah.
Lots of times in the past, a lot of it depends on the mill it's going to. The longest log I've seen hauled in Montana is about 42.5.
But that's to house log people,
Could
and
be,
that's
yeah.
kind of a.
We used to take it to stud mills that long, but typically, yeah.
So that's a trailer, then so I see some of them run a pump. Is that half that length?
They'll put the
16-foot logs on.
16s,
Yeah.
occasionally 24s, depending on how many axles they got.
Yeah, and it's a weight thing. So anyway, you can see, the other thing this kind of depicts is that lumber prices are going up after the recession. Log prices are going up as well. So most everybody's happy.
Diesel's going down.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Oh, it went down. Now what's it doing?
So here again, some of the factors that will influence the stumpage value. Characteristics of the timber is that big old growth is very valuable. There's a bunch of little stuff that barely make a stud. National and international markets. Tricon timber out by St. Regis, they found a market in China, and they were taking ponderosa pine from eastern Montana. It was bug killed, bringing it to their mill, cutting it in metric measurements. So it wasn't the typical 2x4, it was in metric measurements. They were putting it in containers and shipping it to China. That was a market, a niche market that they had found for a while. So there's lots of different things. But to get that log from eastern Montana, they had to rail it. The trucking it just wouldn't do it. And they probably didn't pay very much.
Handle it 3 times.
Yeah.
Once to get on, second time was, and then a third time is when you get it off the railhead there at St. Regis and take it to the mill.
Yeah.
So and you got to factor that cost in. And
Yeah.
so as long as diesel is reasonable, then nobody seems to complain.
Yeah. So, other factors on stumpage, the logging, the hauling costs, depending on where you're working, how far from the mill, those costs could be higher. I just wanted to give everybody an idea that how the mills can afford to pay what they pay, and that it changes over time, and it depends on a lot of different factors. Go ahead.
Do you have a mileage estimate for once they're on the paved road? How much it adds per mile between big towns and so forth?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about hauling here in a little bit, so if you wanna hold that. So this is that same log price line. We do this quarterly, and this chart is on our website. The address is down there. Somebody asked last session, we only do this for fir. Well, the FIR is the Forest Industry Research Group, so it's for all species, and it's an average. If you wanted it for specific species, there's another report that we get, or that we produce. When the mills send us this information, we do it eastern Montana, western Montana. We do it by species, and then we ask them what they think the demand for the next 60 days is going to be. So that's what the letter is. This is from, I think, third quarter of last year, so the numbers for fourth quarter are a little bit higher. But you can get this on our website, and it's posted shortly after each quarter is over. It's a lot of people have found it. We've gotten phone calls from absentee landowners that live in the eastern U.S. saying, "Oh, we saw your log prices and your logging prices on your website. You know, should I log my property now?" We're not in the business to tell you that, you know. But so there are people that find it, and they call us with questions. Somebody asked about why is red cedar poor, and why is the price so low? There's not hardly any mills in Montana that want to deal with western red cedar.
Why is that?
There's not a whole lot of it. There is some. But what they have to do is they have to save it up for a while and maybe run it through the mill all at once in 1 week. They can't run it intermixed with other species because of the residue, the sawdust and chips and stuff. The residue goes to particle board plant or the MDF plant, and they can't, their process, cedar sawdust and stuff causes problems with their process. Their glues don't hold together or something. So, and Idaho is a little different. Idaho has a handful of really good cedar mills. They use cedar products. They produce, decking and lumber. So if people in the western part of the state have cedar, we tell them the best thing to do is to find somebody in Idaho to buy it.
What about that little one in Knoxville? They're still in business.
Do they? And I know there's one up by Troy. We'll have to check into it so that we can include them in our survey. So, mills want logs. So one of the projects that we have been doing is tracking harvesting costs.
Oh boy.
And we do this for Idaho and Montana. The Forest Service hired us basically to do this. On odd number of years, we do a logging cost. On even number of years, we do hauling. We send a survey out. For the logging, we'll give them a scenario of a timber sale. And there's about 400 of these interviews that go out. And this poster is on our website, so if you're really interested in it, you can go and get it there. But we tell them for ground-based, the skidding 600 feet, for cable it's 800 feet, for cut to length it's 1,000 feet. The average diameter of the tree is 13 inches, and it's a partial cut, and there's 42 trees per acre that they're going to cut. we're saying that that comes out to about a load an acre. So we kind of paint this picture in their mind what this logging sale would look like. And then we ask them for their costs, what it would cost to log something like this. So then, and in this poster, it's everybody's response thrown together. So we know people in Idaho do things different and cost different than Montana. But for an average and for posting this is just the way we did it. And I've got slides that show these boxes by skidding methods. So for ground-based and over the 4 times we've done it, and we're going to do it again this year, these are the reported costs. I believe I've got two sets of these. One, I've taken the earlier ones and inflated the numbers to 2013 costs so we can compare them. And there's another set where it's all nominal, those years' costs, and I don't remember what this one is. I think this is inflated to 2013 so we could compare. The totals down here, and this is all in tons, except for the right-hand side where I've converted it to 1,000 board feet, and I used 6.2 tons per 1,000 to make the conversion. But the total is, for each column, is just these ones with the asterisks. So I gave a talk about this project at a Forest Service spring timber meeting, and of course somebody was in the audience with a calculator and he had everything up, and he goes, "Your totals don't add up." So that's why I put the asterisks there. Those are the numbers I used to make the total. I didn't include all the separate skidding distances because it just confuses things. Whether these numbers are right or wrong, it's hard to say. It's an average from a bunch of different people.
But did you ask them point blank, and your replacement costs, please?
No.
You didn't?
No.
Thank you. Case closed.
This is what they would bid to harvest this. You know, whether they included their replacement in their profit, and that's something that the survey that goes out this year, we're going to clarify that and try and come up with it. These numbers are being fed into the Forest Services. They have this huge matrix, and what they use it for is for timber sale planning.
What all's involved in processing?
The processing is
Delivery.
on the landing, taking if it's a tree length type operation, you know, trees cut on the hill and then it's drugged, guts, feathers, and all down to the landing. The processor will pick it up, bucket to length, take the limbs off of it, you know, bucket to length. That's the processor.
Why did the costs go up so substantially in 2011?
From 2009.
From the previous years you've got showing there. It's
It went-
dramatic.
It went down.
Every single cost on there went
Oh,
up
yeah,
dramatically.
Yeah. Dollars per green ton compared to.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, I see.
Thousand
Change
board
this.
feet.
Oh, okay, that's, okay.
What's administration?
Okay.
That would be bookkeeping. A logger that has to flag skid trails, you know, just whatever the logger considered he would charge for his administration and paperwork.
Then
There's
you would add delivery to the mill onto this too.
Right, this doesn't include the haul, this is just the logging. And, you know, this study is a whole different talk. I just kind of wanted to show you how some of these numbers that we're using came up with.
What are replacement costs that you were asking about there?
There are a couple things that are missing here. First of all is the replacement cost for a multi-million-dollar, well, not a multi-million. You start adding it all up, and this is, I mean, when you sit in the pickup truck with these guys, and they just absolutely emit, and you feel so sorry for them because they're underneath just this incredible stressed. The replacement cost for, say, $1.5 million worth of machinery new is, they haven't factored that in. They've been honest with me about that. I feel sorry for them. There's not a damn thing they can do, okay? Because they're competing with the other guy down at $25 a ton. And for another $5, they'll load it for you on your truck and let you go down the road. The other thing is the workers' compensation costs. In other words, okay, my friend, he hires his son, it's an in-family sort of thing, and they work it out so there's no workers' compensation costs. They figure out and then I think that somehow he got his son on his wife's health insurance policy. His wife works at Western Montana College, so somehow they got around that. If you start actually adding these costs in, I mean, I don't see any transit costs there, where some of these men are going an hour. I mean, that's one thing that we're not talking about.
Right. And this, this wasn't designed to capture those things. If we have time, I have a couple slides after the end of my show on another study that shows some of these things. It's kind of interesting. So if we have time, we can get into that.
Yeah, one
of the things that, besides the numbers and the scenario, we also ask them for, what are the barriers to your business? And some other open-ended questions that really help us with understanding why things did what they did. In 2009, everything had just kind of gone down the tubes, starting into the bottom of the recession. 11, the prices were much lower. Why did your prices go down? We're trying to keep our crew together. We're not worried right now about replacement. We're just trying to work. So we will bid things to keep the work and worry about the future in the future. And that's what we have come up with the difference between 9 and 11. Why it dropped? They were basically in survival mode. But that's another
It
topic.
was something intangible as losing the master cylinder out of the the feller buncher.
So,
and that was, then you were.
The same type of thing we did it for cable. We also did it for cut to length. Cut to length numbers are a little bit funky because there's not that many of them around. And in one of these years, and I'm not sure which one it was, we may have only had 2 responses. And to get a good number, we need at least 3.
That's an expensive system, though.
It is.
It is very expensive.
Talking about costs, the forwarder, there's another machine that actually in the woods will cut it and buck it up. And, between those 2 machines, you're looking at $1.5 million, $2 million. So it's expensive. The other part of it, the one we do in alternate years is the haul. We spent quite a bit of time. We did what we call an engineering approach. Actually went to a truck dealer, priced out a new truck and trailer and all the rigging. Talked about tire replacement, maintenance, everything that we could throw into the truck. So we came up with this cost. Got from the truck drivers how many days a year that they figured they worked, and just gathered as much information as we could. And we came up with what they figured. We also asked them point blank, what do you figure you need a day to run this truck? So we were able to come from a couple different directions. When we started doing this in 2009, 2008, I think it was early 2009, diesel was even less than it is today. And then from there to, even the end of last year, it was closer to $4. So we've had to adjust this a number of times based on fuel prices. And we've been able to figure out, what that change is. A lot of them, when you ask them how they calculate what they need. Most of them will go back to, this is how much I need to make a day, you know, based on how many days I'm gonna work out of a year. And so that's how they price out jobs. And they have no control over how, you know, which mill they're gonna end up delivering to. Somebody was asking about highways and getting, probably behind recreational vehicles that slow them down. Sometimes they'll get to a mill, there's 5 or 6 trucks ahead of them, and the front end loader that's unloading it breaks down and they sit. So instead of getting 2 or 3 loads a day, they end up getting 1. So how do you factor that in? So lots of different things that go in.
They send their buddy up on the north unit of the Lim High, where the roads are really smooth and it's really easy getting in and out. There's one little slick spot. And if you're not his buddy, then you go to the south side. South side, I paid money to have that graded, and again, after they beat it up, then again, for that, it's a much further back in, and then you're, I mean, it takes that much longer going in and coming out, and you're beating up your truck again. And that played into it, you know, that.
There again, these are averages. Most haulers, you know, they know, that have been around for a long time, they'll know if they have to go to Seeley Lake from the Bitterroot, they'll know how many trips in a day they can make. Even if they have to go through Missoula, you know, that's gonna take extra time. So they've got it dialed down pretty good. I asked one here the other day if they've seen any adjustments in their rates since fuel has dropped so much. And he said, most everybody's been pretty good and hasn't tried to renegotiate their contracts. He says the next contract, the next job they do, that cheaper diesel will definitely come into play. But right now, they're probably, depending on what their haul distance is, you know, their trucks probably get 5-6 miles to the gallon. So on a day when they travel 300 miles, you know, the difference in $4 diesel and $2.60 diesel, they can put another $120 in their pocket. And hopefully they save it to replace their truck or to do something.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. This is just kind of a percent increase just in changing price of fuel $1, how much it increases it. It also kind of shows, you know, what miles do, the distance, you know, further you haul things. 250 miles to haul a load of logs, it's not outrageous. There's a lot of people that do it. Pyramid was buying a lot of...
Out of Idaho.
Well, and then they were buying a lot over in eastern Montana, around Lewistown. It's a long ways from Lewistown to Seeley Lake.
At Sun Mountain, we just finished hauling from Big Sandy to Deer Lodge,
Yeah,
1 trip a day.
Well, that's a 500-mile trip then for 1 load of logs.
yep. That's a day. And
That's
the
a
other
day.
thing that's happening is the laws and regulations are changing on long-haul truckers. It has to do with hours of how much, you know, how many
Oh,
hours
right,
they can
right.
drive in a day, how many hours they can drive in a week. The regulations weren't designed for log truck drivers.
No, no.
So, and it's hurting. So what I did here is I took all these costs, the average delivered log to the mill at the end of December was actually around 422. That's what our average showed. So I took these costs, which that's what this is, minus the revenues. Potentially there could be $174 a thousand to the landowner. That would be, if you want to call it stumpage or payment, you know, that number changes, it depends. There's so many things that can make it change, but the idea is that it's a positive cash flow. You're making some money. I did the same exercise 2 years ago for a webinar, and at that time, logging costs weren't that much different. The price that they were getting at the mill was a lot less, and I think ground base was still positive, quite a bit less. CTL, I believe, was fairly positive, but both cable and helicopter were losers. Helicopters is a loser.
What's CTL?
Cut to length. That's an automated forwarder with processing in the
I don't know how
woods.
much we're gonna see that, you know, I
See
think
which.
the forwarder systems, I think that, I mean, you'll see it, my understanding from the equipment dealers is that something you're gonna see in Oregon and Washington, because they have the value of timber to support that, but.
There's some big ranches in eastern Montana where they come in real handy. The ranches don't want to build roads. You can move logs a long ways on a forwarder. If, if there's a patch of timber, a mile away, and you can go out there and get it on the forwarder, haul it to a road where a truck can get to it without spending a bunch of money building a road. If the soil is such that it's, the road would be muddy anyway or something. I've seen it pencil out, and I've seen some of the big ranchers do it, particularly ones that were trying to get ahead of the pine beetles. So some of the products in Montana, plywood, if you ever get a chance to go through a plywood mill, take advantage of it. They're pretty amazing.
Only 2 left in Montana.
There's 2 left.
Yeah.
There's Plum Creek ones in both.
Yeah.
One's in Columbia Falls and one's in Evergreen, which is just right by Kalispell. And veneer plywood logs are worth more. They're usually larch and Douglas fir and the bigger diameter ones. So on the last quarterly delivered log survey, Plum Creek told me that they're paying $510 a thousand for pewter logs right now. So I converted it to 85. That's probably 6.2 or 6 tons per thousand. That's what that conversion
How
was.
big does it have to be a pewter? And it's gotta be kind of knot free and all that.
Yeah, and typically the bigger Doug fir and larch are. We used to use 8 inches small end diameter on the log. So, yeah,
8 on the small end?
it's 8 inches on the small end.
So the DBH on the large end could be
The
15,
DBH
20
is-
inches?
The diameter
Yeah.
it's probably no more than 4 inches bigger. So
Oh,
a 12-inch diameter tree
Oh.
at DBH,
okay.
Do those mills have an upper limit beyond which they can't handle it? That we would find around here. I mean, I know about redwoods and stuff.
Yeah, usually not in Montana. They do have, I think, if I remember right, it was like a 30-inch. They couldn't get through their door from the outside into the mill. They typically, in a plywood mill, when Bonner was running full bore, Bonner had 4 lathes. And what they do is they soak their logs in a big vat, kind of try and get the moisture into them, made them easier to peel.
What would be considered a good length for a stud mill? It's got to be larger than, doesn't it?
I'll say again.
A stud mill?
Stud mill goes down to small, real small.
It does?
Yeah.
5-inch minimum.
That's what
Yeah.
it is.
Whatever you can get a 2x4 out of.
Well, yeah, but I would think that they would prefer not to get 1 2x4 per log. They would rather get 5 or 6. But,
That's probably a preference.
yeah.
But that's not
Some of
saying
them-
they're gonna pay for
Yeah,
it.
depending on how the mill's configured, some of them can move those small logs through so fast that they.
Really?
Yeah, that they're just making money. A lot of them have a preference that the biggest stud log that they want is 8 inches on the small end.
Oh, really?
4.5 inches on the top.
Oh, okay.
And, because they cut them to you know, your 8 foot, 9 foot, whatever the length of the board is.
Right.
So they can just shove them through just as fast as they can.
Pyramid in City Lake goes down to a 3-inch top.
Yeah, and they've got a different product that comes out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the more innovative the mills are, you know, the better.
Okay.
Log homes, you know, log home facilities during the recession, they pretty much disappeared. You know, they're tied to the housing market.
Yeah.
The Bitterroot, you used to be able to drive down there, gosh, it seemed like every 2 miles there was a log home place. But capital-wise, it's pretty easy to put together a log home facility. You know, a few draw knives, a chainsaw, and a crane, and you're in business, if you can find workers. And it's a pretty value-added type business. Post poles and rails, you know, log furniture, the smaller diameter. Last time we talked to post and rail places, they're willing to pay $55 to $75 a ton. So a log truck, you know, you might get 25 tons of small diameter lodge pole on it. And they're, a lot of them would rather use green. They were having trouble with some of the dead bug-killed lodgepole. The ones that treat the butts, evidently that dead wood wouldn't absorb the treatment as well.
The carbide blades, when they get the post spinning the lathe, those carbide teeth, they'll just split the
Dry logs
open. Yeah, it's if they're dry. If they're green, then it goes right on through, and then you can have a drying process in the other end. So then it takes the treat over in Coeur d'Alene, I think it is. Right. There's a couple different places you can do that.
Bowman's out by Lincoln, I think, still treats.
Yeah.
So, but they're always looking for material. So this chart is similar to that last one where we had all the logging scenarios. I put this one together because of the chipping plant out of Bonner. So the way to read this thing, they're paying $35 a ton for delivered pulp logs. These would be the logging costs. And then there's haul costs in here at $3 a gallon and $4 a gallon. And when I did this 2 years ago for that webinar, there was a lot more red up here. What really was obvious was the distance to haul. But at that time, the value was, they were only paying $29 a ton. Since then, they've become more established. They know what they're doing. All those chips that are being generated out there are going to Wallua, a paper mill. It's over by the Tri-Cities in Washington. They also sell some to Inland Empire Paper in Spokane and some to us, which is another paper mill in kind of eastern Washington.
Going by rail.
By rail, yep,
Can they accept needle kill at that price?
yes.
Yeah. It's a good place for it.
This is a picture of the Bonner. If you ever get a chance to tour this place, it's pretty amazing too. It's when they first started, they had a couple portable trailer type chippers that they just chip into rail cars. And then they built this big electric chipper grinder that it's pretty amazing. They'll fill, I think they try to fill 14 to 18 rail cars a day.
Are they increasing their capacity?
I don't know that they've ever reached their capacity. It's a balance between how much the paper mill wants and how much they can buy. They've tried, you know, they've reached out. In fact, 2 years ago, pretty much their top price was right around that $29, $30 a ton. They've expanded it to 45, but to get the higher rate is to get logs from further away. I know they're accepting logs on rail cars from Thompson Falls area. I think from further eastern Montana, but for truck hauled pulp, they'll take Kalispell, the Bitterroot. So they're reaching out. They haven't figured out what pays, but yet they still want to be able to get the logs that they need to provide the chips, whatever their contract is with
So
the
they-
paper mill.
No cottonwood, no quake and ash, it's all
Right.
conifers.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there again, no cedar. That's because in the paper making process, there's something in the cedar that causes problems with their digesters or their chemical reaction.
They divide it into white chips for parchment and then red chips for newsprint. You've heard that, haven't you? That's what they're doing?
Yeah, it depends on where they're going. But, yeah, when Frenchtown was going out here, they were making liner board, and it really didn't matter, except they didn't want any burn logs because they'd end up with black spots in their paper,
Oh.
which was, it was a defect. It didn't hurt the strength or the properties, but it didn't look good. And at one point, they bleached their liner board so it was white because they had a big market in Japan. And the Japanese are real particular on appearance, so they wouldn't take any burn logs at all.
So essentially, their only other competition is up in Columbia Falls with doing pulpwood right now, correct? In this area?
Yeah, in Columbia Falls, there's nothing, there's no chipper up there. There's a MDF plant. Plum Creek has an MDF plant that makes, this is MDF. Kind of like particle board. Roseburg has a particle board plant out by the interstate in Reserve Street. A lot of people don't know what that is. There's that big berm around it. Well, that's a particle board plant.
The old LP plant.
Yeah,
That's
You can't
LP,
sell them
right?
logs directly. They
No.
have to- Yeah.
no. They, when they were having trouble getting chips or sawdust, they actually did a test where they chipped logs right there on the site. But then they were competing with other people and couldn't pay for it. Incidentally, where do logs go? Right there by the particle board plant. Occasionally, you'll see a bunch of rail cars with logs laying there. Well, RY, who has a mill in Townsend by Helena, and then in Livingston, they're over here buying logs because they're unable to get enough logs
Really?
there. They'll put them on rail and they'll rail them to whichever one of those mills that needs it. And they're competitive with Pyramid and Tricom, and just depends on what kind of log, which species of logs they wanted.
Why do they have that berm around their plant?
The story that I heard, and take it for what it's worth, the Montana DEQ had been getting complaints about sawdust blowing from that plant. So every time the winds came up, north side of Missoula was covered with sawdust. And it became, they threatened to take away the air quality permit. Well, at the same time, across the interstate, the dump was opening up a new cell. So they had all this waste dirt that they needed to do something with.
Oh.
So
That's a good place to
being
put it.
neighbors, they kind of helped each other out.
And isn't that where part of the methane from the dump actually goes to power the plant?
They ran a pipe over, and
Yeah.
last time I was out there, they were still scratching their head on whether it worked or not.
Okay.
But yeah, that was an idea. If you drive by the dump, sometimes you see this single flame burning. And that's the methane that she's talking about. So where are all the facilities? When you talk to people, think, well, Montana used to be a wood product state, and there's nothing here anymore. That's one of the things that these reports that show. We had to do a census, each one of these that we can identify, and we're always looking for new ones. So that Cedar one that you mentioned, we'll look into that. But on a 5-year basis, we'll do this. We send them all a questionnaire, ask them about their inputs, what they produce, their outputs, and just try and put together a pretty good picture of what's going on in Montana.
So these can be small.
Mom and pop
Band.
outfits.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
and there are. I'm trying to find,
1,000, board feet.
there's a lot of small, little miser wood mills.
Oh,
And those are, we try to identify as many of those as we can. In this report, somewhere, I think that says page 15. It's got the 2009 total. It's not on this chart anymore. But for 2011, we were only able to identify 105. In 2009, there was still 127. 41 lumber mills, 41 sawmills.
okay.
11 were over 10,000 or 10 million feet a year.
But isn't that a fraction of what,
What it used to be.
yes,
Oh, yeah. If you go back to 76, there was 38 mills that
Okay.
produced over 10 million.
yeah.
Wow.
But for 2009, there was 41 lumber mills, 2 plywood plants, 3 pulp and boards, that would be MDF and particle board. And at that time, Frenchtown was still running, so that would be part of it. There's 14 post and pole plants, 33 log homes, so that was right at the start of the recession. 14 log furniture makers, and then other products, which could be bark, pellets, yeah, a lot of other things that take in raw wood and make a product out of it.
Oh,
We still consider Montana a pretty integrated wood products state, just because we can take the raw logs, do something with them, take the residues from the mills and make something. Everybody was pretty concerned when Frenchtown went down, because they helped in all kinds of forest management activities. We go out and thin a stand of small dog hair stuff, and release your stand or something. There was no place that would take that. When Frenchtown was operating, you could take it out there and they'd chip it up. When Bonner opened with that chipping facility, that really, added something back that really made everybody feel a lot better about the industry.
What's the relative volume of Bonner versus the big pulp mill when it was on average run?
Bonner's quite a bit less. I don't remember exactly
when did they open up?
which one, Bonner?
Bonner there used to be a plant out there. that
Right,
closed.
there was 2
Mill.
plywood mills and sawmill, 2
Right.
sawmills. The chipping facility's been going for about, Frenchtown shut in 2010, and there was about 2 years where there wasn't anything, so
Oh.
2012, 2013.
Oh.
Lumber is 85% of what happens to the logs in Montana. So only 15% of the harvest is post and poles and chips and that sort of stuff. So lumber is the big thing. This one has a lot going on. It's pretty busy. Harvest is the lines at the bottom. Black is the total harvest. The middle line is private harvest. Then the bottom is the Forest Service harvest. There used to be a third or another harvest line which had the state, BLM, and others, and it was pretty much a straight line. The state's really consistently produced around 60 to 65 million. It's kind of a mandate. The state manages their land for school and another state trusts. So they've done a sustained yield study, and that's the number that the study says that they should be harvesting for a sustained time on the state forest lands. The lumber number, that's the same as the one we saw before. It's just smoothed out. It doesn't have all the spikes and stuff in it. And the bars are the capacity, the mill capacity of the state. In 1990 it was considerably more than what it is now.
I'm surprised private has dropped. You would think with the drop of DNRC and Forest Service, private would actually be raising.
Yeah, kind of what the backstory on some of that. This is also industrial land. And,
So that's where we
Oh.
get the TNC ground.
so it went from industrial land
Oh,
to TNC. Also, that was the recession.
Oh, yeah.
Private landowners,
Prices went way down.
they would be way better off to store their trees on the stump.
Absolutely.
We used to call it stump storage,
right.
Right.
rather than log and sell it unless they had to for some
Yeah.
reason. We're starting to see an increase. We kind of projected an increase in private harvest will happen again. But because of when the Forest Service stopped producing volume like they had done previous to 1990, the mills that stay in existence would entice either the industrial lands or private land to provide the logs. And it's, at some point, the stands have been harvested and you're just waiting for it to grow so you can do another harvest. So there's going to be a gap there that is pretty well understood.
So what's going to happen when you have a lot of landowners here in western Montana that see the end of the life cycle for their lodgepole coming up? Do you think that's going to create more timber and drop prices then, or?
Because there's a pent-up demand in Montana, I don't think it'll affect prices.
Okay.
We'll talk about capacity and kind of look at a concept that's kind of interesting to me. I wasn't real familiar with it until I started working here, but so when we ask the mills for this information, we ask them, what is your capacity? And then we define it for them so that we're all talking about the same thing. So our definition of capacity is, what could you produce if you had as much timber as you possibly could physically use, and at the other end, the markets were such that you could sell everything that you produce. So it's kind of a pie in the sky. This is what you could do. And we talked a little bit, I think, about this. 85% of the timber goes to sawmills and plywood, and that's where the capacity is. What sawmills can do, and what they have done, and what they did during the recession, they reduced the number of shifts that they ran. The equipment is there. Whether they run it 8 hours a day, 16 hours a day, or 24 hours a day, they can do that. What they need is the raw material, and they need somewhere to sell the material when they make it. So they have, and we figured in 2009 that most of the plants were running at maybe 50% capacity. So they were down to one shift. Some of them went down to only working 4 days. they're trying to, there's an economic principle that at some point, your overhead costs are going to be more, or you'll lose more.
By not running.
By not running than running. So there's a balance there. And that's, in tough times, that's where they try to find that balance. So if things got better, you can hire another 50 people and run another shift. And so that's what a lot of these capacity numbers are based on. They're pie in the sky against what they're actually doing right now. So this one has a lot. You can tell a lot of stories about it. If I started my career right about in here somewhere, and you know what happened in the early '80s? There was a recession. If you ever, I was trying to buy my first house about then, and interest rates were 15% if you could get a loan.
Yeah.
So housing starts crashed, and along with that, the harvest went down. So that's pretty, you can explain that pretty well. But during that time, the mill capacity stayed, fairly the same. Mills were, reducing shifts. At that time, I was working for Champion, and Champion owned the Bonner facility. They also owned the Frenchtown paper mill. They also had company logging crews. And so there's this big balancing act. We need to keep the logging crews working because one of the crews was a union crew and it was in the contract. So they were working a certain number of days a week. The mill, it wasn't making any money. They weren't able to sell any of the lumber or plywood. So it got to that balance. Is it cheaper to close down or keep things working? Well, what ended up happening was they kept the mill open to produce residues because the paper mill needed residues, and they weren't getting it from the other mills that had either shut down or curtailed to the point where the paper mill was having problems. So, you kind of balance all these things. That's another reason it's kind of nice to have an integrated system or a company that can do it all. And paper and lumber are both cyclic industries, and it just so happens that they're opposite cycles. So when paper's good, lumber may not be, but when lumber's good, paper may not be. So if you follow that right now, lumber's getting better, paper's not doing as well. There was another recession in '90. Of course, then what we refer to as the Great Recession. Harvest kind of started down around 1990. Does anybody know what happened around 1990?
NAFTA and Equal Access to Justice Act.
I was going to say the spotted owl. I imagine all those things.
Spotted owl
paid
didn't catch
into
up here.
Spotted owl wasn't in Montana, but what happened was there was a realization of environmental laws that the Forest Service was or wasn't maybe taking into account. There's a couple new acts that passed Congress that scrutinized things. That's where the NEPA process came.
Oh God!
Came into
what a
effect.
wreck!
So that happened about 1990. Montana capacity and harvest from that point started dropping, even though from 90 to 2004 or 5, housing starts were just going nuts. Some of that ended up being the bubble.
Hollow victory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was, housing starts were over 2 million.
So where'd they get the lumber for the housing starts?
Yeah.
Canada.
Canada was a big thing. The housing starts in National, the capacity and harvester is just Montana. There's a lot of mills in Oregon, in Washington, in the South, so there's a lot of lumber around.
Have we lost a lot of our private loggers during this last recession? It seems like it was awful tough for them.
Yep. A lot of them ended up going to the oil fields. A lot of them,
Just underneath so much debt,
Yeah.
there's just no way, there was just, and I mean, I had low, what I was doing was a niche market. I could get underneath. I watched some of these guys, and they shot me some of their daily expenses, and that's if they had their own children working for them or friends. It really came to that. And then there was this time where equipment wasn't getting fixed, and it was just a,
age
And
demographic
some
is
of you
another
guys
thing.
gonna-
there we go, that was the other.
A lot of the loggers that have been around are, their 50s and 60s.
And their shoulders are gone and their knees are gone.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of young people that are interested in
Working.
getting in the woods. I was trying to be a little.
Or they do the, not as tough, I mean, they're doing the clearing and doing,
Yeah.
just a lot of.
I had a discussion with a major logging contractor in western Montana, and asked him about his workforce, and he said, the young people that were actually want to come to work are really good. And
Or what?
really good.
Oh,
A lot of like mechanical equipment is like playing video games, it's all a
Yeah.
joystick and
it is a dangerous industry.
it is, it's the number one.
Yeah.
It's either commercial fishing or logging, but they're
Right.
neck and neck. But the young ones that really want to work are really good. And he says, some of them, they'll come out, the hours are too long. They'd rather go work at McDonald's for a lot less pay. He said he'll pay them as much as he can, and some of it's pretty good money, but
Well,
they
the
just don't
oil
want to do
fields
it.
are beckoning now.
Yeah, they were, I don't know what's gonna happen now.
That's true.
But I think even before the oil prices dropped, we were seeing a lot of loggers come back. They didn't want to be away from home, they wanted to, be with their families, raise their families, live in West
Well,
Montana.
it takes so much money to live in the back and
Yeah.
it just takes so much to.
You're a young logger, what do you think?
Pretty much dead on. I know
Sorry.
Our crews are just almost exactly what you said.
Yeah.
I would say both our crews and the guys hauling, our average age is 40, 45. We have probably, we employ, between lumber and logging, we employ right at 300 people, and I would say 20% or less are under the age of 30.
Where's that? Pyramid?
Some mountain lumber and logging, deer lodge.
And that's really, you think about it, that's the way it should be. Where there's park logging up here, I think the day, with the exception of some minor niche markets, I think you're going to see the day of the independent within this next, say, decade, go the way of the world. Because they cannot take the financial burden on their
Yeah,
shoulders anymore.
yeah, it may be a full circle, I mentioned that Champion had company logging crews, mid-1980s, those shut down, they couldn't afford all the capital for the equipment, all the benefits, insurance, that type of thing. It was cheaper for contractors to burden, pay that type of stuff. Not that the contractors weren't any cheaper or anything, but, you just put the risk on somebody else.
Yeah, well, isn't getting good wood still an issue? Every time you pick up the paper, they're suing the Forest Service over some timber
Yeah.
sale, and
Yes.
it gets sued for 2 years, and that's still happening.
Timber supply, yeah, that's the number one.
Timber
thing.
supply, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
The
quite a
other,
few bills in Congress
That's
trying to
really-
address
yeah.
that.
One of the other quarterly things that we ask the mills are the number of workers, production employees, labor income, lumber production. So in Montana, we track that, and we've got records that go way back. We're able to, a lot of national business census type things are old, you know. It's the same issue with this, you know, by the time you get the information, it's outdated, it's not real pertinent. But on a quarterly basis, we're able to kind of track the health of the industry, and we can at least see big trends. Sales, the sales figure, 2004, between 2004 and 2014, you know, it's not quite half. What we lost between 2004 and 14 were the Bonner Mill, Frenchtown. There was a lot of sales of paper from Frenchtown, so a lot of that difference is almost strictly Frenchtown. So, talk about the outlook, and this is the information that's in here. The two articles in here that are the group that I work in. We do the manufacturing and then the wood products. Now I'm just going to talk about the forest products, the wood products part of it. And it's an annual survey. It's been going on for years and years and years. And there's certain facilities that we call every year with a list of questions. There's 20, 25 questions. Some of them are open-ended. Some of them we ask better than last year, the same as last year, worse than last year, those types of things. So some of it's just kind of a, what are your feelings? What do you think is going to happen? Not a lot of statistical math type things. But still, you know, it's the same people, and we're able to kind of gauge what they think is going to happen for both the current year and then the coming year. So this is for 2015. There's 4 years worth up there to kind of compare trends, I guess.
Worse than last year.
So purple is 2015. And this is the overall outlook. How do you think 2015 is going to be? So between better than last year and the same as last year, almost 90% say it's going to be as good or better. So that's fairly optimistic. 10% think it's going to be worse. Since there's only 37 answers, you know, one negative answer could be that 10%. So that's the outlook. We say that this is a positive outlook. Employment was another question. So 76% their employment is going to be the same or better. Not as good as the year before, where 100% said employment would be the same or better. If you add those numbers up, sometimes it doesn't equal 100. There's always somebody in the crowd, hey, your numbers are wrong. They don't add up.
Well, when you did the survey, I'm sure the price of gas was still high too.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was October, November. The reason some of them don't add up to 100 on each year, some people we get the answer, I don't know what employment's going to be next year. Call me next year. Some people say, I don't want to answer. We don't get that too often in the forest products surveys. But in some of the other manufacturing, there's some manufacturers that say, and I don't know why they agree to do the survey to begin with, because they say, I'm not going to tell you. The life of the surveyor, I guess.
You don't know that you're being laid off by one of the oil companies until you get called into the office.
Yeah.
You don't even know there's a problem.
Production, it's pretty positive. Over 80% think that their production will be as good as last year or better. So our forecast for the industry is home building should continue to improve. All the national forecasts are saying that. 2014, the latest number we heard, and it changes, they adjust it. They'll adjust the 2014 number for 2 years. It was a little over 1 million starts, which is a little less than what they predicted, but it's still better. The overall average, long-term average is between 1.2 and 1.4 million starts a year. And the national forecasters are saying probably within 2 years they'll be within that range, 1.3 million or so, which bodes well for lumber. And along those lines, the market's going to be better, but it may be volatile. Oil prices, I'm sure, are going to just drive things crazy. The unrest in the Middle East, who knows? They all impact all kinds of economic indicators. Sales increase, employment and earnings should increase. Timber availability is still a major constraint. And we know that. Heard somebody mention about things going on in Congress. There's an attempt. We have 2 senators right now that are real interested in seeing something happen. Whether there's time before we get into the next presidential election cycle. I think there's supposed to be a small window where they can get something done. Hopefully they will. We can't go on the same way. I have a lot of friends that work for the Forest Service, and it's just driving them nuts. I mean, they want to do something. There's a roadblock everywhere they go. So a lot of them, as soon as they hit that magic years in service and age, they retire. So we're losing a lot of knowledge. I'm sure that the young people coming in to replace them are smart, but it'll take them a while to get on board. So I think that's all I had. It's almost 5. You guys probably want to hit the road.
How about biomass? You were avoiding that, weren't you?
Well, yeah. Martin said he'd drop in and talk about it. We do have a couple projects involved with biomass. One of them is called NARA, Northwest Advanced Renewable. And that was a $40 million government grant. The University of Washington, Oregon State, Washington State, University of Idaho, and Montana were involved in it. My office, our part of it was we were going out on logging jobs, measuring felled trees, seeing what got on trucks to go to mills, what got left in the woods. And so it's kind of a survey of what biomass is there. It's ongoing. There's another 1.5 years in it. The chemistry is just amazing. The idea of taking any kind of biomass, whether it's switchgrass, sugar cane, wood, and making a fuel out of it. It's been around. The Nazis did it in World War II. And so they somehow have to get it to the price outright. The jet fuel part of it, they've been able to, they'll say that they can produce jet fuel for about $8 to $9 a gallon. You can buy jet fuel out at the airport for $4. So the economics aren't there. What they've known right from the start of that project is there's other products, side products that are going to come out of it that they always talk about. Well, look at NASA. Look at all the things that we got out of NASA by trying to go to the moon. There's all
Bill's
these,
program.
yeah. they said there's gonna be these side projects. In a couple of years, we'll know.
So do you happen to know then, that aren't there 2 schools that put in biomass heating systems, one in Thompson Falls and one in Darby? Are they?
There's a
running?
number of those.
And they're working?
They're working now.
Okay.
There's more of them. The state has the DNRC has a project where they're helping other facilities. There's hospitals, state-run organizations that are trying to do it. We tried to put one in here at the university, and it didn't go too far. There's a bunch of
Biomass bus?
Yeah, there was a bunch of people that were concerned with air quality, and it was about the same time that the price of natural gas just dropped, and it didn't. The University of Idaho, they heat their whole campus with biomass. So the other guy was one more biomass story that's, I think it's kind of neat. There's a company in Missoula called Blue Marble, and they take coffee grounds, they take the stuff from brewing beer, and they produce, and wood chips. And they are able to produce things. Douglas fir chips, he was able to produce some kind of a flavoring and an aroma that he was selling for between $500 and $800 an ounce. You know, it's kind of a niche thing. But he also, and these chemists are just amazing. He took western red cedar leaves and he produces some kind of a pharmaceutical that removes skin tags. So there's a lot of people that are working on a lot of different things.
And the algae.
Yeah, up at Stoltz, that algae.
I heard that burned down.
It did, but sounds like
rebuilding it.
they're gonna rebuild. I toured that a couple times, it's pretty amazing. They're producing a liquid fertilizer and a solid fertilizer. Just some other things. You had a question?
Are you proposing then, and there's a market for slash rather than burning it every fall?
That was the plan,
Makes sense,
yeah.
yeah.
So I don't know if I
Depends on
mentioned
how
it in
far
here
you
or
have to
not.
haul it.
In my career,
Right.
I probably burn more slash, created enough BTUs to
Yeah.
heat New York for 2 years.
But isn't it kind of good to let that, you know, disperse it and let it rot into the ground? That way the nutrients are,
Yep.
otherwise.
Yeah, you don't want to remove it all.
No,
And it's pretty tough to remove it all.
Yeah.
You know, when we first started talking about biomass harvest, there was a group of people that were really concerned and they were going to stop all biomass harvest. They were afraid that we'd be out there with a vacuum cleaning up all the needles. So, any more questions? I'm pretty well done now.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
thanks a lot.